Listen closely because what I'm about to tell you contradicts everything you've been taught about fighting for love. There's a weapon in every man's arsenal that most never dare to use. Not because they don't know it exists, but because using it requires something rare. The courage to let go completely. We're told that real men fight harder and speak louder and love deeper. We're taught that giving up is weakness and walking away is cowardice and silence is surrender. They lied to you. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is simply stop. Stop explaining. Stop proving. Stop being available. Not from a place of revenge or manipulation, but from something far more profound. Self-preservation in its purest form. Here's what nobody tells you about being constantly present. Your presence loses its weight over time. Like a song played on repeat, what once moved someone becomes background noise. When you're always there and always accessible and always forgiving, you don't become more valuable. You become furniture in someone's life. Think about it deeply. When has anyone ever appreciated the air they breathe? Only when it's gone do they gasp for it. Men make a critical error in relationships that cost them everything. They believe that more effort equals more value. More texts and more explanations and more emotional labor and more availability. They think if they just communicate better or try harder or prove their loyalty one more time, things will magically shift. But when someone has already decided your presence is guaranteed, your effort doesn't create change. Your absence does. This isn't about games or manipulation. This isn't about making someone chase you or playing emotional chess with hearts. This is about something deeper and more fundamental. Reclaiming the balance that's been lost when you've been treated like an option instead of a priority. When you've communicated clearly and shown consistent effort and maintained your standards and you're still feeling undervalued, staying doesn't demonstrate strength. It demonstrates that you'll accept whatever treatment comes your way. Your absence isn't cruelty. It's consequence. And consequence is the only teacher some people will ever understand. The psychological impact of withdrawal is profound and undeniable. When you stop filling the space with reassurances and explanations and emotional availability, you create a vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. That empty space forces reflection in ways your words never could. She'll start replaying conversations in her mind. Noticing what used to be there that isn't anymore. Recognizing patterns she took for granted every single day. Your stability becomes visible only when it's removed. Like noticing the hum of electricity only when the power cuts out unexpectedly. Disappearing must come from the right place inside you. Not ego-seeking validation. Not revenge-seeking satisfaction. Pure self-respect seeking alignment. What happens in her mind when you truly vanish isn't what you expect at all. You need to understand something fundamental about human psychology that changes everything. We don't value constants in our lives. We value contrasts. When you're permanently available, you create no contrast whatsoever. Your presence blends into the routine of her daily existence. You become as noticeable as morning coffee or the evening commute. Necessary perhaps, but completely unremarkable. True absence creates stark contrast against everything familiar. And contrast triggers deep evaluation that words never could. But here's where most men completely sabotage their own mission. They disappear for 3 days, then panic and break their own silence desperately. That interruption destroys the entire emotional journey she needs to experience. Because absence works on a timeline, not a stopwatch you're checking every hour. In the first phase, there's often relief washing over her. Especially if tension existed before your withdrawal from her life. She might actually feel lighter without the weight. Tell herself it's healthy and needed. Convince herself she's better off with this space between you. That's the surface reaction, and it means absolutely nothing at all. The real shift begins when habit disruption settles into her bones. Humans are creatures of rhythm and routine that we rarely acknowledge. If she was accustomed to your presence through morning texts and evening calls and steady availability, your absence creates deafening silence in that rhythm. Silence, when you're not used to it, becomes louder than any words. It's the moment she reaches for her phone to text you, then stops herself cold. The time she checks notifications expecting something from you and finds nothing there. That's where awareness starts building slowly, like water filling a cup drop by drop. Women process loss differently than men do, and you must understand this completely. When a man feels loss, it hits immediately and intensely like a punch. When a woman feels loss, it develops gradually and intellectually first over time. She'll rationalize your absence to herself, justify it with logic, distract herself with friends and social media and maybe even other attention seeking her out. But distraction is always temporary and fleeting. Once it fades and silence persists, the emotional processing truly begins deep inside. This is where your discipline gets tested beyond anything before. You'll feel the urge to check her social media obsessively, analyze her stories for hidden meanings about you, interpret every online move as a signal meant for your eyes. But reacting internally keeps you chained to her completely. True disappearance requires psychological detachment as much as physical distance from her world. The comparison phase becomes crucial to everything unfolding. When she begins comparing your absence to her current environment, things crystallize clearly. If new attention feels shallow and novelty wears thin and consistency is missing everywhere else, your stability becomes undeniably clearer in hindsight. When she finally breaks the silence, how you respond determines absolutely everything ahead. After sustained absence, if the connection had genuine depth beneath surface interactions, there comes a moment when silence stops feeling neutral and starts feeling unbearably heavy. That's when loss registers emotionally instead of just intellectually in her head. This usually doesn't happen in the first week like you expect. It happens when routine settles back in and distraction fades away completely and she realizes you didn't just step back temporarily. You actually meant it this time. The first reach out is typically tentative and carefully measured. A casual message that doesn't expose any vulnerability whatsoever. "Hey, how have you been doing lately?" That message isn't random chance or coincidence at all. It's a temperature check disguised as friendly conversation. She's measuring whether access is still easy like before, whether you're still emotionally reachable on demand whenever she wants, whether the door she took for granted is still wide open waiting. This is where most men completely fumble everything they built. They respond instantly within seconds, enthusiastically like nothing ever happened between them. They relieve the tension too quickly and the entire emotional arc collapses immediately. Because the moment she feels full access again without any effort required, the weight of your absence dissolves into nothing. The lesson evaporates like it never existed. Masculine discipline here is absolutely critical to maintaining frame. Not coldness that pushes away. Not rudeness that reveals bitterness inside. Not punishment designed to make her suffer equally. But measured response that communicates shift. Calm and steady and completely unemotional in tone. You don't interrogate her motives, but you also don't pretend nothing happened between you. Your tone communicates that something fundamental has shifted permanently. That access to you is no longer automatic like turning on a faucet. If her reach out is intentional and vulnerable instead of casual, that's completely different. If she expresses genuine reflection about what went wrong, acknowledges her part in the disconnect honestly, speaks with clarity instead of ambiguity, dancing around the truth, that suggests real growth has happened inside her. Growth matters more than anything. But even then, you move slowly and deliberately forward. Words are easy under loneliness eating at someone. Consistency is far harder to maintain over time. You've heard promises before that meant nothing eventually. You need to see patterns now instead of words. When she truly feels the loss deep in her core, her energy changes noticeably. There's humility in her voice, softness in her approach, awareness of what was lost. Not defensiveness protecting ego, not pride guarding image. If ego still dominates the conversation completely, your absence didn't produce reflection at all. It produced anxiety about losing control. And anxiety isn't the same as genuine respect earned. The real change isn't in her reaction to your absence at all. It's in who you become during the silence you maintain. When you disappear correctly without emotional collapsing or waiting by the phone obsessively or spiraling internally through scenarios, something fundamental shifts inside you permanently. You stop viewing yourself as someone who needs to be chosen to feel complete. That internal break from dependency is powerful beyond measure. Once you prove to yourself that you can walk away and survive it intact, your self-image strengthens in ways that last forever. The biggest long-term change isn't in her at all. It's in you and how you see yourself. You begin understanding that your presence carries actual weight. That your consistency isn't ordinary or easily found. That your emotional stability isn't replicated in most men she'll ever encounter. When you remove it and feel the silence without breaking down, you start respecting yourself on levels you never knew existed. There's a psychological cleansing that happens during sustained absence from her world. The emotional fog clears and you see things objectively. You stop romanticizing small moments that meant nothing. Start seeing patterns you ignored before. What once felt like undeniable chemistry might reveal itself as simple inconsistency. What once felt like intense passion might reveal itself as pure imbalance. Distance sharpens perception like nothing else possibly can. If she eventually returns and you choose to engage again, you engage from a completely new position of power. Not from fear of losing her again. Not from urgency to fix things immediately. But from evaluation and assessment instead. You're no longer auditioning for her approval anymore. You're assessing whether she meets your standards now. That subtle shift in posture changes everything about the dynamic between you. And if she doesn't return at all, the silence becomes your greatest teacher. It teaches you endurance through difficulty. Emotional regulation under pressure. That closure doesn't require a final conversation or explanation. Sometimes closure is the absence itself speaking volumes. Sometimes silence is the final answer you needed. The most important shift is this undeniable truth. You stop negotiating your standards for anyone. Before, you may have tolerated small misalignments to preserve connection at any cost. After disappearing and holding your ground firmly, your tolerance recalibrates to higher levels. You become less afraid of starting over completely. And when you're not afraid of starting over fresh, you become nearly impossible to manipulate through guilt or obligation. Another long-term effect is how you handle tension in future relationships differently. You no longer react instantly to every shift. No longer chase clarity aggressively when things feel uncertain. You understand the power of space like never before. You recognize that over-explaining weakens your position dramatically. That steady silence sometimes communicates more strength than any emotional argument ever could. After you've walked away once with dignity intact, you never see relationships the same way again. Once you've truly disappeared and held your ground through the storm, something inside you becomes quieter in the best way. Not numb to feeling. Quieter with peace. The frantic need to resolve everything immediately fades into background noise. You realize that not every silence needs to be filled with words. Not every distance needs to be chased desperately. That realization alone transforms how you experience relationships moving forward. Before, you may have associated love with urgency and panic. Constant reassurance to feel secure. Immediate repair after tension arises. Emotional availability around the clock without boundaries. But after stepping back and surviving it, you begin associating love with stability instead. Stability doesn't panic when things get uncertain. Stability doesn't overcorrect every small issue. Stability observes carefully and responds rather than reacts emotionally. There's also a recalibration of what you find attractive in women. You begin noticing women who move with clarity instead of chaos. Women who communicate directly instead of playing subtle emotional games designed to test you. Because once you've experienced imbalance firsthand, your nervous system starts craving steadiness above everything else. Disappearance teaches you emotional pacing that most never learn. You no longer rush connection hoping it becomes something. You allow patterns to reveal themselves naturally over time. You don't ignore small red flags just because chemistry feels strong initially. You understand that intensity without consistency is just noise and drama. Another long-term effect is detachment from outcome that isn't apathy. Real detachment from needing specific results. You can care deeply without needing things to go a certain way. That mindset is powerful because it removes fear from your actions completely. When fear is gone, your behavior becomes authentic rather than strategic manipulation. You also become less reactive to attention shifts that used to destroy you. If she becomes distant, you don't spiral instantly into worst-case scenarios. You watch her actions. You measure consistency against her words. You give space without collapsing internally like before. That calmness protects your dignity and forces truth to surface naturally without pressure. Here's something important that changes everything. Disappearance doesn't turn you into someone unavailable or cold. It turns you into someone selective about where energy flows. Selective with time that's limited. selective with energy that's precious, selective with emotional investment that costs you. You stop pouring deeply into uncertainty that gives nothing back. Over time you start recognizing early when someone is unsure about you. You feel it in tone and hesitation and body language clearly. And instead of trying to win certainty through effort, you quietly pull back before attachment grows too deep. That early discipline saves you years of confusion and heartbreak ahead. The final evolution isn't about getting her back at all. It's about never losing yourself again in anyone. There's a quiet confidence that develops when you know you can walk away at any moment. Not as a threat you hold over someone. Not as leverage to get your way. But as alignment with who you are. When staying becomes a choice rather than a necessity driven by fear, your energy shifts fundamentally in every interaction. You're there because you want to be present. Not because you're terrified to lose what you have. This shift changes how women respond to you in future encounters completely. They sense that you're not clinging to outcomes desperately. That you're not scrambling for validation from them. That your life continues with or without their approval of you. And that steadiness often creates the very respect men once tried to earn through over-effort and sacrifice. You begin noticing something subtle but powerful over time. The less you chase, the more clarity appears naturally. When you're not pressuring the dynamic to be something it isn't, people reveal themselves faster than ever before. Uncertainty shows up clearly without you digging for it. Commitment shows up clearly without you forcing conversations. You don't need to interrogate or investigate anything anymore. You let behavior speak louder than words ever could. Emotionally, you stop taking distance personally, like an attack on your worth. Sometimes people drift because they're misaligned with your path. Sometimes they drift because they're confused about what they want. But you no longer assume every shift reflects your inadequacy as a man. That detachment protects your self-worth from external validation needs. There's a deeper peace that develops when you're no longer fighting to maintain connection. Your mind becomes quieter without constant overthinking. You sleep better at night. You focus better during the day. Your energy isn't scattered across overthinking scenarios that haven't happened. That peace is underrated in ways most men never experience. And once you feel it deeply, you won't trade it for chaos again. You realize something important that shifts your entire perspective permanently. Love should not feel like constant negotiation over basic needs. It should feel mutual and effortless in its flow. If you're constantly managing imbalance, you're not building intimacy at all. You're managing instability that will eventually collapse. Disappearance teaches you the difference between the two clearly. Eventually the narrative changes inside your head completely. It's no longer will she feel the loss of me. It becomes, do I feel aligned with this situation? That question shifts power internally where it belongs. You stop measuring your value by someone else's reaction to you. You measure alignment by your own standards that never compromise. The real transformation is this undeniable shift in perspective. You understand that your worth isn't determined by whether someone misses you when you're gone. Subscribe if you're done being an option. The men who don't will keep wondering why nothing changes. You know better now.